I have lived for 101 years. When you reach a century of life, you start to believe that the world has no more secrets to tell you. You've seen empires rise and fall. You've watched the technology of your youth become the relics of a museum. And you've buried more friends than you can count. But the greatest mystery I ever encountered wasn't the vastness of the world or the secrets of history. It was the woman who slept beside me for 72 years. Her name was Evelyn. I thought I knew her. I thought I knew the rhythm of her heart and the architecture of her mind better than I knew my own. After 7 decades, how could I not? We shared every meal, every tragedy, and every triumph. But 6 months ago, after she passed away at the age of 98, I found a small rusted tin box buried in the back of a garden shed I hadn't stepped into since the late 90s. And what I found inside didn't just surprise me. It shattered every single thing I thought I knew about the life we built together. It made me realize that I had spent 72 years living with a stranger who loved me enough to never let me see who she actually was. If you think you know your spouse, if you think your marriage is an open book because you've been together for 10, 20, or 50 years, I'm here to tell you that you might be living in a house of mirrors. And sometimes, the person you love most is the one you've seen the least. We met in 1946. The world was healing from a great darkness, and I was a young man looking for something solid to hold on to. Evelyn was that solid thing. She was quiet, composed, and had a way of looking at you that made you feel like the only person on earth. We married within a year. It was the perfect union of that era. I was the provider, the ambitious engineer who built bridges and skyscrapers, and she was the keeper of the home. She was the one who made sure the children were bathed, the garden was tended, and the dinner was on the table at exactly 6 o'clock. I took great pride in our stability. We didn't have those loud screaming matches the neighbors had. We didn't have scandals. We had a peaceful, predictable life. I used to tell my friends that Evelyn was easy. I meant it as the highest praise. I thought it meant she was content. I thought it meant she was fulfilled by the simple life I had provided for her. But looking back now, from the vantage point of a century of living, I realized that easy is just another word for invisible. For decades, our life was a series of routines. I'd come home, kiss her cheek, and tell her about the stresses of the office. She would listen, nodding at the right times, offering a gentle word of encouragement. She never complained. She never asked for more than I gave. I noticed, occasionally, that she would sit in the dark of the porch after the kids were in bed, just staring out at the trees. I'd ask her, Evie, what are you thinking about? And she would always give the same answer. Just the weather, Henry, just the weather. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? I was too busy being the hero of my own story to realize I was just a spectator in hers. I never noticed that she stopped playing the violin, even though she had been a prodigy in her youth. I never noticed that she stopped painting, even though our attic was full of her early vibrant landscapes. I just assumed that as life got busy, those hobbies simply fell away. I didn't realize they weren't hobbies. They were pieces of her soul that she was systematically cutting off to make herself fit into the small, comfortable box I had built for our marriage. There were signs, of course. There are always signs, but we ignore them because the truth is too inconvenient. I remember once, back in the 60s, I came home early and found her in the kitchen, surrounded by maps, dozens of them, maps of places we'd never been: Norway, Morocco, the Andes. She looked startled when I walked in, and she folded them up so quickly she tore one of them. Just daydreaming, Henry, she said with that polite smile. I laughed and told her we'd go to the Poconos for our anniversary instead. It was closer. It was safer. It was what I wanted. She nodded, put the maps in the trash, and made me a sandwich. I didn't think about those maps again for 40 years. I didn't ask why she was dreaming of the fjords of Norway while she was trapped in a suburb in Ohio. I didn't want to know the answer because the answer would have required me to change. As we grew older, the children moved out and the house grew silent. But it was a comfortable silence, or so I thought. We reached our 50s, our 60s, our 70s. We were the golden couple. We held hands when we walked in the park. People would stop us and say, "I hope my husband and I are like you when we're that age." And I would beam with pride. I thought we had won. I thought we had mastered the art of love. But Evelyn was getting quieter. She started spending hours in that old garden shed. She said it was for her potting plants, but she never seemed to bring any flowers out of there. I didn't pry. I felt I had earned the right to my own peace, and she had earned the right to hers. But sometimes I'd catch her looking at me from across the dinner table, and there was a look in her eyes I couldn't identify. It wasn't anger, it wasn't sadness, it was something colder. It was the look of a person who had already left the room long before they stood up from the chair. Then the end began. Evelyn was diagnosed with a slow-moving illness when she was 96. She handled it with the same quiet grace she handled everything else. She didn't complain about the pain. She didn't cry about the loss of her mobility. But in those final months, she stopped talking almost entirely. I would sit by her bed, holding her hand, telling her about our memories. I'd talk about the day we met, the day the kids were born, the house we built. I thought I was comforting her, but she would just look at the ceiling, her eyes vacant. One night, right before the end, she looked at me and said something I will never forget. She whispered, "Henry, do you even know what color my eyes are?" I was stunned. I said, "Of course, Evie. They are blue. They've always been blue." She closed her eyes and gave a tiny, heartbreaking laugh. "They are green, Henry. They've been green for 72 years. I looked closer, and for the first time in a lifetime, I really saw her. They were green, a deep forest green. I had looked at those eyes every day for most of a century, and I had seen what I wanted to see, not what was actually there. After she passed, the house felt like a tomb, not because she was gone, but because her ghost was everywhere, accusing me. I started cleaning out the places I had neglected for years, and that's when I found the tin box in the shed. I thought it would be old photos or maybe some gardening tools. But when I pried it open, I found a stack of notebooks, hundreds of pages, all written in Evelyn's neat, disciplined script. They weren't diaries, they were scripts. Evelyn had spent 50 years writing plays. Brilliant, searing, complex plays about women who traveled the world, women who were spies, women who were scientists, women who left their husbands to find themselves in the wilderness. And tucked between the pages of the notebooks were letters from publishers in New York and London, dated from the 1950s and 60s. They were invitations. They wanted to produce her work. They called her a once-in-a-generation talent. I sat on the dirt floor of that shed and read through the letters. She had turned every single one of them down. Every single one. And on the back of one of the rejection letters she had written to a famous director in 1962, she had scribbled a note to herself. It said, "Henry needs the house to be quiet. Henry needs me to be the anchor. If I go to New York, the bridge he's building will fall down. If I am the light, he will be in the shadow. And he doesn't know how to live in the shadow. So I will stay here in the dark, and I will write these worlds that I will never see, so that he can live in the world he thinks he created." The shock didn't hit me all at once. It was a slow, agonizing realization that seeped into my bones. I hadn't been the provider. I had been the parasite. My stability was bought with her dreams. My peace was built on her silence. She hadn't been easy because she was content. She was easy because she had decided that her own happiness was a price she was willing to pay to keep me from falling apart. I realized that the woman I loved, the quiet, gentle Evelyn, was a character she had performed for me. The real Evelyn was a fierce, brilliant, adventurous artist who lived 1,000 lives inside her head, while she was folding my laundry. She had loved me with a ferocity that was almost terrifying. She had sacrificed her entire existence to be the person I expected her to be. I looked at the date on the place. She had written the last one only 5 years ago. It was a play about an old man and an old woman sitting on a porch. In the play, the man talks and talks about his life, while the woman imagines she is a bird flying over the ocean. The play ends with the woman finally taking flight, and the man still sitting there, talking to an empty chair, never noticing she's gone. It was us. It was exactly us. I had spent 72 years talking to an empty chair because I never bothered to listen to the person sitting in it. I felt a regret so deep it felt like it would crack my ribs. At 101, you don't have time to fix things. You don't have time to make amends. I can't go back to 1962 and tell her to go to New York. I can't go back to the kitchen and ask her about the maps. I can't go back and look her in those green eyes and tell her that I'm ready to live in the shadow if it means she can finally be the light. I spent the next few months reading every single word she wrote. I realized that she was a much better writer than I was an engineer. Her plays were full of a wisdom and a wit I never knew she possessed. I found myself laughing at her jokes and crying at her tragedies. I fell in love with her, the real her, only after she was buried in the ground. And that is the cruelest joke of all. To live a century and only find the love of your life when it's too late to tell her. I started wondering about all the other things I missed. Did she like the tea I bought her every morning? Or did she just drink it because it was easier than telling me she preferred coffee? Did she actually like the Poconos? Or was she crying inside for the fjords of Norway every time we pulled into that dusty resort? I'll never know. Those secrets went into the earth with her. I realized that I had been a good husband by the standards of the world, but a terrible husband by the standards of the heart. I had provided a house, but I hadn't provided a home for her spirit. I had protected her from the world, but I hadn't protected her from the suffocating weight of my own expectations. I had loved her as an extension of myself, as a supporting character in my own movie, rather than as a whole, complicated, beautiful human being with her own destiny. And now, at 101, I sit on that same porch she used to sit on. I look out at the same trees, and I realize that the weather she was always looking at wasn't the rain or the sun. She was looking at the horizon. She was looking at the life that was waiting for her, the one she gave up for me. If you are listening to this and you are young, or middle-aged, or even old but still have time, I beg you to look at your partner tonight. Not the version of them you've created in your head. Not the person who does the dishes or pays the bills or makes the bed. Look at the human being. Look at their eyes. Really look at the color. Ask them a question you've never asked before. Ask them, what is the dream you gave up so that we could be together? Ask them, what do you think about when you're staring out the window? And when they answer, don't try to fix it. Don't try to justify yourself. Just listen. Let them be the light for a while. Let yourself sit in the shadow. Because a marriage that is easy is often a marriage that is dying. The real love, the kind that lasts 100 years, isn't about finding someone who fits into your life. It's about being brave enough to change your life to fit who they truly are. It's about realizing that you don't own the person you love. You are just a guest in their soul. I wish I had been a better guest. I wish I had noticed the green eyes. I wish I had read the plays while she was still here to hear me applaud. But all I can do now is tell her story. I took those notebooks to a publisher last month. They were stunned. They are going to publish them. They asked me what the collection should be titled. I told them to call it The Silence of Evelyn, because that silence was the loudest thing I ever ignored. I am 101 years old. I thought I knew my wife. I was wrong. I was so wrong. She was a giant, and I treated her like a pebble. She was an ocean, and I treated her like a puddle. Don't make my mistake. Don't wait for a tin box in a garden shed to tell you who you're living with. Wake up now. Look at her. Listen to her. Before the silence becomes the only thing left between you. Because in the end, the only thing that matters isn't the bridges you built or the money you made. It's whether or not you actually saw the person who was standing right in front of you for 72 years. Don't let them disappear. Don't let them turn into a ghost while they're still breathing. Love them enough to let them be seen. That is the only thing I know for sure after a century of living. And it is the one thing I wish I had known when I was young enough to do something about it.